All right, we are going to do a quick run through the main events of World War One. If you need a little bit more detail, check out my playlist and find the World War One playlist for IB history, and you're going to find a little bit more detail on these topics. But for today, we're going to just run quickly through the biggest events happening during World War One, and of course, we start on the Western Front. This follows Germany's Schlieffen Plan, which was their war plan, their pre-war war plan that said you can't fight France and Russia at the exact same time, so you knock out France by invading through neutral Belgium, and then you can send your guys on your rail lines across to fight on the Eastern Front against Russia. Unfortunately for the German plans, they were slowed down in Belgium. Don't underestimate the impact of the machine gun during World War I. And the Schlieffen Plan is ultimately a failure. The Germans are never able to sweep around Paris, and we get locked into a stalemate as trenches are dug all along the Western Front, ultimately from the English Channel down to the Alps just north of Switzerland. So this stalemated war was due to the fact that the defenses of World War I, particularly the machine gun and artillery, were just too strong. So this war became what we call a war of attrition, where each side is trying to grind the enemy down and expend enough of its resources and manpower to get them to ultimately surrender. Modern weapons like the machine gun and artillery made this particularly deadly for both sides, where they experienced tremendous losses. On the Eastern Front, we've got a little bit of a different story. Now, Russia mobilized faster than the Schlieffen Plan had accounted for. And so the Germans were forced to fight the Russians very early following their invasion of Belgium. The losses for Russia are absolutely disastrous, as the Russian military is got the manpower, but it doesn't have the technological equipment that the Germans have. So they're going to lose a couple major battles early in the war at Tannenberg and Masurian Lakes. This will lead ultimately in 1917 to two Russian revolutions, a February revolution that ousts the Tsar, and then a second October revolution called the Bolshevik Revolution, where Vladimir Lenin and his Bolshevik communists overthrow the temporary provisional government that was established after the first revolution. This is going to lead Russia to leave the First World War, sign a treaty with Germany called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and that really cleans up the Eastern Front for the Germans. Now, those aren't the only two fronts. There's also a war down in Italy, between Italy and Austria-Hungary, where the Italians joined the Allies early on in the war in May of 1915. And they're going to fight the Austrians, and it is tremendously costly battles for the Italians and the Austrians. Italy, for its part, and we'll talk more about this as we get to the years between World War I and World War II, they're going to lose over 1 million men, and ultimately out of those peace treaties gain very little territory in it. There's war in the Ottoman Empire and in the Middle East as well. The Ottomans very early on join the Central Powers with Austria, Hungary, and Germany, and we will see major campaigns in the Ottoman Empire. The Gallipoli campaign is the largest and most devastating for the Western powers, where the British are trying to open up a route into the Black Sea to support the Russians. And this will just be a horribly costly defeat for the British. But they will ultimately gain the upper hand as the British gain Arab support against the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire will be defeated by the Allies as well. Now, in 1917, in addition to that Russian Revolution, we're going to see the United States enter the war. The U.S. will declare war in April of 1917, following Germany's resumption of what we call unrestricted submarine warfare. Basically, the Germans being open to sinking anything traveling across the sea to try to stop those supplies from making it into the war front. This combined with what was known as the Zimmermann telegram or the Zimmermann note, a German message to Mexico to try to encourage them to invade the United States to distract the Americans. This will gain enough support for President Woodrow Wilson from the people to ultimately declare war on Germany. Now, the United States really has to put together a military and get it across the Atlantic, so the Americans really won't be seeing major battlefield action until early in 1918. And so in these last 2 years of war, the enthusiasm that was there at the beginning of the war is now gone. The Russian Revolution removes Russia from the Eastern Front. We've got the Americans entering the war, and American manpower and resources now are going to make this German defeat inevitable, as the Germans, even with Russia defeated, are really struggling on their home front. Their last-ditch effort to break through enemy lines will come with what is known as the Spring Offensive of 1918. This, though, will ultimately fail, and by November of 1918, the German High Command will ultimately move towards an armistice and call for a ceasefire in this war, which does happen on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. And when we talk together again, we'll talk about the peace treaties that follow. Talk to you soon.